All right, let's mix up a custom black and white image. I still have open those same two files from before, agrariangothic.jpg and grayscalecomposite.jpg, and I've gone ahead and created a base channel mixer adjustment layer here inside the layers panel, but I haven't really done anything with it yet. So I'll go ahead and turn it on, double click on its thumbnail to bring up the adjustments panel. If you're working along with me, make sure to turn monochrome on. And then from here, it's a matter of deciding which values we want to work with. Now, I was saying let's go ahead and emphasize blue the most, and then green, and then red. So why don't we just change out these values? Currently, we're seeing green emphasized the most. And these, by the way, are the default recipe for mixing an RGB image down to grayscale. So traditionally, green gets the most emphasis, red slightly less, and blue way less than the others. Let's go ahead and switch things around. I'm going to take that blue value up to 50. Now, of course, my total's way too high, so I'm clipping highlights like crazy inside the image. I'll Shift-Tab my way back to the green value, and let's go ahead and take that guy down to 30, let's say, 30%, and then I'll Shift-Tab to red and take it down to 20%. And we end up getting this mix here, which is very different from what we saw a moment ago. What we saw a moment ago was very similar to this image here, the grayscale composite.jpg file. So this is your typical everyday average grayscale mix, the default mix that Photoshop comes up with when you choose the grayscale command, compared with this wacky mix that we've created right here, which is fairly different. Now, let's say you look at this, and you might as well go ahead and update the histogram. The values add up to 100%, but we want to check how accurate our mix is. And when I look at that, I think, well, we're kind of weak in the very dark shadow department, and we're definitely weak with our light highlights. I'd love to expand the contrast. That's not something you can do using the channel mixer by itself. Definitely don't use constant, by the way. That'll just move that histogram back and forth. Look at it go slamming against the right-hand side of the graph. Leave that value set to 0, is what I'm looking for there. What I'd suggest instead is that you just go ahead, if you're looking for contrast, you just throw on a fairly straightforward brightness contrast adjustment layer. You might be able to achieve a little bit more control using something like curves, but typically where black and white effects are concerned, brightness contrast gives you more than enough control. And by the way, it's very easy to apply. So I'm going to click this left pointing arrowhead in the bottom left corner of the adjustments panel to return to my adjustments list, and I'll Alt-click or Option-click on that very first icon, and I'll just go ahead and call this B/C like usual. Click OK, and I'm going to start with the contrast value. By the way, make sure Use Legacy is turned off. And if you've been following along with me, it's very possible because the last brightness contrast modification we applied, we went ahead and turned Use Legacy on. And if you start raising that contrast value very high at all, notice you're going to get some very strange effects very fast. And that's Use Legacy for you. It's that terrible behavior that once upon a time was routinely associated with this command. So go ahead and turn off Use Legacy. And you can increase the contrast all the way to 100% without clipping either highlights or shadows. You're going to have a lot of highlights that are very near to being clipped, but they won't quite be clipped, as you'll see if you update that histogram. But you will have a high degree of contrast inside this image, and this is great for like a film noir effect or something along those lines. If you want a significant amount of emphasis on those highlights and shadows and a lot of contrast, why then absolutely go for it. I'd also recommend, if you intend to print this image, that you go ahead and take the brightness up just a little bit, because the image will darken up as you print it due to the fact that the halftone dots actually bleed into the paper and grow a little bigger, and as a result, the image grows a little darker. So you want to compensate accordingly. Anyway, in my case, I don't want to go this far. And actually, we start seeing banding in the background if I go with such a high contrast value. So I'm going to take my contrast level down to more like 30, I think. And I'll take my brightness down to 10, Use Legacy off once again, and we get this result right here, which I think is intensely dramatic. By comparison, once again, to the standard everyday average grayscale composite, which is this guy here, this new effect is welcome indeed, in my opinion. All right, so that's one take on things. Let's try something different. I'm going to leave that BC layer intact because no matter what, it's going to well serve our black and white needs. I'll turn off this channel mixer adjustment layer because, after all, I want to apply a slightly different adjustment, but I know what I have in this one is actually really good, so I don't want to lose it. So why not just set it aside, just turn it off, and then go ahead and click on that background layer once again, bring up the adjustments panel, and Alt or Option click on the channel mixer icon once again, And I'll go ahead and call this one, let's say, infrared B&W. And basically, in infrared photography, you end up sort of emphasizing one color channel way over another, but it ends up being shorthand for raising one of the color channels beyond 100% and lowering the other one below 0%, just as we did in order to increase the saturation of the full color image a few exercises back. All right, so let's start things off the way we need to by turning on the monochrome checkbox here. And then I'm going to tab to the green value, and I'm going to take it up to 100% so that we're taking absolute advantage of the green channel. We're going to use every single luminance level that the channel has to offer. And then I'm going to add in 50% red, which leaves us with way too much brightness at this point. Notice that our total is now 170%, and if I update that histogram, I have all kinds of clipping going on in the highlight region. So I need to take down some value, and that some value is going to be blue. Instead of having it set to 20, I'm going to go ahead and enter -50 like so. So we have 100% green plus 50% red minus 50% blue takes us back to 100%, as we can see, represented by the total. And if I update that histogram, it's looking good. And then we have a really great version of this grayscale image to show for it as well. So I'll go ahead and close the adjustments panel. Again, that brightness contrast layer is working very well for us. So just by way of contrast here, let's take a look at the original grayscale composite. That is the default grayscale composite right here, where it's a fairly lackluster image. As you can see, it has a fair amount of intensity associated with it, but that's because of the subject of the image. Very interesting people to look at here. And also great composition as well, with this one woman way in the foreground, the other woman out of focus in the background there. But luminance-wise, not really too much to get excited about. Compare that to the version of the image that we have right here, which is very bold and very dramatic, and appears to me at least to much better represent the scene.